Welcome to Happy Headlines, brought to you by the Good News Network, who was started by Jerry Weis-Corbley, who thought we should all have a little good news in our life. Here you can see Jerry holding her #1 selling book on Amazon for journalism. And now the good news. Jerry has picked out 28 of the stories from the last 2 decades to put into this book. And this is unbelievable. This is worth the read, people. And the Good News Gurus podcast from the Good News Network features positive news, silver lining, and hashtag Corona kindness. When you need it most, subscribe on iTunes and on Android devices on Podbean. Thank you so much. I think we should start out with a quote for today. Make up your minds that happiness depends on being free, and freedom depends on being courageous. Perculus, October 6, 2020. Good news in the history, October 6. 20 years ago today, street celebrations erupted in Yugoslavia as the last remaining dictator in Europe, President Slobodan Milosevic, resigned following a public uprising over allegations of vote rigging during elections. It came to be called as the Bulldozer Revolution, after one of the most memorable episodes from the day-long protest in which someone operating a large load around a government building, the radio station of Siberia building, considered to be a symbolic of the Milosevic regime's propaganda. More good news on this day. Horpoco Perilous Endurance Dice, the earliest surviving opera, premiered in Florence, 1600. Thomas Edison projected his first motion picture, 1889. The High Court of Australia presided for the first time, 1903. The Jazz Singer opened in theaters, the first prominent talking movie, 1927. Pope John Paul II joined Jimmy Carter, becoming the first pontiff to visit the White House in 1979. Fiji became a republic in 1987. The U.S. Supreme Court effectively allowed same-sex marriage to proceed in 11 states. All right, give it a round. When it refused to review 3 federal court rulings that overturned state bans, 2014. 131 years ago today, the Moulin Rouge Cabaret opened the first time in Paris, birthplace of the high-stepping can-can, a scandalous dance for the times. The venue still entertains tourists today. 60 dancers from a dozen different countries perform 2 shows every evening on the spot that is still known for its roof and the Moulin Rouge on top. Red Windmill. The world-renowned Paris Cabaret, which was featured in a 2001 Oscar-nominated film with Nicole Kidman, Edwin McGuire, entertains 600,000 audience members each year since 1889. On this day in 2007, Englishman Jason Lewis completed the first human-powered circular navigation of the globe using a pedal boat, rollerblades, bicycles, kayak, and his feet. The adventurer and sustainably campaigner finished the harrowing journey in a little over 13 years. His award-winning books describes how he survived a crocodile attack, blood poisoning, malaria, incarceration for espionage, and was hit by a drunk driver and left with 2 broken legs in Colorado. Lewis had never crossed the ocean before, nor had he ever rollerbladed, kayaked, or rode a bike for more than a few miles. In the process of completing his Expedition 360, Lewis also became the first person to cross North America in inline skates, and the first to cross the Pacific Ocean by pedal power. Together with Stephen Smith, Lewis completed the first crossing of the Atlantic Ocean from mainland Europe to North America by human power. He successfully ended his 4,833-day expedition, having traveled 46,505 miles. You can watch it here on YouTube. Just check it out, people. Just looking at that story, that takes a lot of determination. That takes a lot of courage. That takes a lot of willpower. You gotta have willpower. He's not getting paid for this. I mean, yes, he wrote a book, but during the time that he was doing it, he was not getting paid, people. He wanted to do this. He wanted to be successful. How bad do you want to be successful? And our next happy headline, how to wake up from the trance of unworthiness. This is on Good Talks. The lesson, though we rarely conscious of it, we continually evaluate ourselves and are convicted that something is wrong with us. In this audio session, acclaimed psychotherapist and Buddhist practitioner Terry Brock takes us through the process of waking up from a mental state that we might not realize that we're caught up in. And once we can let go of the constant self-judgment, we can actually live up to our potentials, people. Join her as she explores the factors which lead to the trance of unworthiness. How can we identify it as it happens, break free of the cycle of the self-doubt, and most importantly, develop trust in our own natural goodness? Noble excerpt, quote unquote, I found that usually there's a gap between our standard of how we should be and our own experience. Listen to what she says. I found that usually there's a gap between our standard of how we should be and our own experience. And it is that gap that makes us feel like we're not okay. The number one deepest regret of the dying are that they didn't live true to themselves, that they lived according to the expectations of others, of the shoulds. And I thought it would be tremendously useful for people to have guided passageway through and beyond the forces that guide us to live unfaithfully to ourselves. Be true to yourself. Know who you are, people. That's what she's trying to tell you. The speaker, Tara Brock, is an American psychologist, author, and prominent of the Buddhist meditation. She is guiding teacher and founder of the Insight Meditation Community of Washington, D.C. Although Dr. Brock teaches her Wednesday night meeting in Bastille, Maryland. You can download Tara Brock's audio session, the RAIN meditation, and browse her other audio meditations at the Sounds True digital library. Okay, so I just clicked on that Sounds Digital True library and it's not there, and I just want to show you that it's not found, people. It's okay. Sometimes things happen. We don't know what happened here, but we're gonna keep going. Okay, thank you so much. The podcast Sounds True was founded in 1985 by Tammy Simon with a clear mission to disseminate spiritual wisdom and to wake up the world. Since starting out on the project with one woman and her tape recorder, the group has grown into a multimedia publishing company with more than 80 employees, a library of more than 1,500 titles, featuring some of the leading teachers, visionaries of our time, and an ever-expanding family of listeners from across the world. If you want to learn more, you can check out their YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or website. The Good News Network presents Moth Mondays, Inspirational Storytelling. Robert Scherer tells an adorable story of a familiar fondness in this week's edition of Moth Monday, a Good News Network partnership that features videos from this non-profit group, The Moth, showcasing the art of storytelling. As his grandma began displaying the symptoms of early-stage dementia, Robert Scherer found himself spending more and more time in her New York City apartment. Although he was one of her prime caregivers at the time, Scherer did not want to fluster his grandmother by taking all of her responsibilities at once. So he would often make up excuses to sneak around her apartment in order to take care of her bills and errands in secret. For a time, Scherer managed to keep his snooping under radar, but then his grandma sat him down for endearing conversation. Listen to the amusing story below. The Moth gives people an opportunity to tell a true story in front of a live audience, and sometimes their stories are chosen to air on the radio show, now celebrating its 10th year and broadcasting on 485 plus public radio stations, and the Moth podcast, which is downloaded over 52 million times a year. The Moth's third book, Occasional Magic, True Stories About Defying the Impossible, is now available for purchase through your favorite booksellers. I just want to say that I follow The Moth on YouTube, and their stories are very inspirational. As you may know or may not know, I am on the trail of being a positive speaker, of bringing good news, informative news, courageous news, joyous news, happy headlines from Chico Chad. Now, what I want to tell you is this group has done something unbelievably good, and I would just want to send out my gratitude to the Moth. You guys are awesome. You guys are great, and continue doing what you are doing. Next in the happy headlines, 3 steps to either build a good habit or break a bad habit. The lesson. Whether you're breaking old habits or forming new ones, changing your behavior can seem like a daunting task. But there is plenty, pretty, simpler formulas for understanding how we can form and change our habits. This is Particular Talk. Brian Johnson details 3 simple steps that you can use to break a bad habit. If you want to further and learn how you use 3 steps to build a good habit, you can visit Johnson's website. It was awesome, folks, and you can check out the website there, as you can click on the link when you check out the Good News Network when they bring you happy headlines. Notable excerpt. The 3 laws of breaking a bad habit. Number 1, make it invisible. Number 2, make it hard rather than easy. Number 3, make it terrible rather than awesome. So, for our purpose, let's assume that the habit you want to set wants you to use your phone less. First question, how do we make it invisible? Well, how about we set an alarm for when we want to put our phones away? Cheers! Science says at least 30 minutes of an hour before our ideal bedtime then the alarm goes off. We shut down our phone and bury it in our closet. Second, how do we make it hard? Brian Johnson is a philosopher and founder of Optimize Me, a website, app, and free video series that help people to optimize their lives so they can be their best selves. He studies self-improvement books, then breaks them down into bite-sized chunks and philosopher's notes. For busy people who want more wisdom and less time, he also offers optimal living classes and online training for your hero's journey. Podcast. Brian's podcast, Optimize with Brian Johnson, features the best ideas from the best optimal living books. More wisdom is less time, between 4 and 19 minutes each, to help you live your greatest life. Subscribe, Stitcher, iTunes, and Podbean. Here you can see Brian giving his best speech. Happy headlines! How detoxing from heavy metals saved a man's life when all else failed. The lesson: heavy metals like cadmium, lead, and mercury can lead to a diverse of serious palate and health complications, including everything from cancer to depression. Josh Mason suffered from mercury poisoning from both tooth-filling sushi and other sources for 3 years before finally realizing what ailed him. Many mental disorders are associated with symptoms of heavy metal poisonings and can be traced all the way back to Roman times. Heavy metal drug detoxification is a powerful tool with some good science behind it, and it's a tool that saved a young man's life. In this podcast, Mason outlines the deliberating spiritual and mental struggles he endured throughout his bout with mercury-induced mental illness. Furthermore, he asks the world for a little more understanding in regard to the hardships faced by people every day around us. Notable excerpt. First, we would be for people to change their water. Our water makes up 75% of our blood and of our body. So we got to change our water. We have to change our water. I love natural spring water from the earth. I love distilled water from the home distiller. And when we change our water, we change our thoughts, we change our vibration. It's very important that we start drinking good quality water. The other part of the physical advice would be to potentially start experimenting with some kind of fasting. Thank you, Josh Mason. And here you can check out his podcast right here. We're not going to get into it, but it's Jared Robinson's Josh Mason right here. You can check it out and watch it later. Forgiveness can have a much bigger impact on our physiological well-being than we ever imagined. Happy headlines brought to you by Chico Chad. The lesson: do you find it difficult to forgive other people? Are you wondering why it is so difficult to go on with your life after something bad has happened to you? Once you have been hurt, the fear that you could be hurt again will always follow you. But in order to avoid letting this fear control your life, you need to stop running away from it and face it, so as to make space for something greater and bigger in your life. In this video, Vishen Laitani tells us why it is so important to forgive people. How can we practice forgiveness, and what great effects this simple but still difficult act of radical forgiveness can have on our lives. Learn to forgive people, learn to let go, learn to let God. God is the positive person inside you. Notable excerpt. Sometimes the world, the universe, God, however you want to call it, gives you these moments of stress so you can rise above them. Michael Beckwith calls these Kisho moments. Kensho moments are moments when you grow from pain. Something happens. Maybe your health breaks down. You end up in a hospital, but you grow from that. You learn to appreciate your body. Another philosophy, I think of it as a phrase, hurt people, which simply means everybody who hurts you is doing it because at some level they were hurt themselves. That is deep, people. They were just passing it on. They're just giving the garbage to you. Stop accepting garbage from other people so you don't continue passing it on. Think about human history and how nations fight nations for generations because of this crazy idea that hurt people. But we can forgive. We can move on. The host, Vishen Lakhani, is an entrepreneur, education, technology innovator, speaker, investor, and philanthropist. He is also the founder and CEO of Mind Valley and the author of The Code of the Extraordinary Mind. The podcast is the Mind Valley Podcast. Is available on Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and Google Play. Please check it out, people. Vishen Lakhani.